All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started with Unit 4. So this is where we're at, Unit 4. A question came up in terms of the multiple choice. The FRQ and the SAQ have their own time slots. So if I think correctly, I believe the multiple choice and historically the multiple choice in the first SAQ set has its own time slot, and then the rest of the free response does. So my guess is if they keep the same thing, it'll be, actually, you know what, probably most of them will have its own time slot. So my guess is that multiple choice should have its own time slot. The DBQ should have its own, and the both SAQ sets may have their own, but I'm not exactly sure. You gotta, yeah, I'm not exactly sure on that, how the timing's gonna go. All I know is that there is a required time for each one. And at least with the stimulus-based multiple choice questions, you've got usually generally a minute per question. As a minute per question, each SAQ is about 12.5 minutes per set, and the DBQ is an hour. So if you do the math for those, they should add up just right. I'm not exactly sure what's paired up with one another. So there are the practice sessions that are provided. We may take a look at those if time allows. But again, time is of the essence here. 1 minute per question, that includes reading the passages, yes. Okay, answering the questions, as we'll do some practice here, we'll kind of give you that sense. But yes, you will have to read and respond within a minute. So each set is about 3 to 4 minutes each. That's another way to look at this. All right, so let's take a look at Unit 4. This is 1450 to 1750. So first of all, let's go and review this particular periodization. So basically, if you get a question with the content for this unit in it, you should be able to bring up some of the stuff that we discuss here today. Okay, so generally, hey, if we look at the time period, 1450-ish, okay, why 1450-ish?
More advances in maritime.
So advances in maritime was known as the Maritime Revolution, but that's only a part of it, right? Because the Maritime Revolution created what particular change? What did the Maritime Revolution result in?
The Columbian Exchange.
Discovery of the Americas.
Right, so things like this, the Columbian Exchange, but particularly all of a sudden now, it creates with the European settlement of the Americas. Okay, that's important, but really this is, when we talk about this unit here, our first real instance of globalization. I don't know why it's not showing up here, but hey, our first real instance of globalization. That's part of the 1450s. So either you have the development of these American colonies, and then you have the traditional, plus you have the traditional land-based empires, okay, that are formed or growing at this particular period. Okay, why 1750?
New forms of government are uprising in Europe.
And based also new forms of government based upon what? Like what's going on in Europe that will provide these?
The Enlightenment.
Right, so things like the Enlightenment, right? The Enlightenment is going to lead to particularly what? The Enlightenment, other of these ideas with new forms of government, those are just ideas until you get to
revolutions,
right? Okay, revolutions leading to the independence of these and challenges to these traditional land-based empires. So our unit scope is this particular time period in here. So think about American colonization, the traditional land-based empires, and how in the end, all of this is going to get shaken up in 1750. So, but the key theme for us in this particular unit is global expansion. And really from here on out, and really most of the world history curriculum, you want to be able to think about how whatever you are studying affects the rest of the globe. And not only that, but where else this particular phenomenon is happening. Okay, so things to think about with most of the content that we are looking at here. So with that, let's go and examine the questions as a whole here. Okay, first of all, and I didn't want to reveal that just yet. All right, I'm going to go through these questions with you. First of all, European maritime trade. European maritime trade, exploration of the globe in this period was brought about by, most of you guys got this one. So one, incremental innovations in naval technology. Technology such as what?
Smaller ships that can carry larger cargoes.
So in this case here, not necessarily smaller ships here, but yeah, probably more advanced vessels. Some of them can get quite big. Some of them initially were smaller, things like Spanish galleons and so forth. But what were the innovations, by the way? What are some, if we were to come up with some examples of innovations?
Compass.
So compass is one. No, by the way, if you guys are interacting in the chat, okay, please go ahead and make sure that's public. Okay, please make sure whatever you're sharing is public. That way I get to see what's going on, and other people get to see, so I can also better respond to it as well here, because otherwise I'm going to end up repeating your responses and answers, and that just kind of eats up time. Okay. So things like you guys mentioned, new forms of map making. For instance, map making, the Latin sail, right? These triangular sails that you can go ahead and read direction. Okay, better maps, the astrolabe, the compass. We got map making and so forth. All right, caravels, so various types of ships like caravels and galleons and East Indiamen and so forth. But either way, all of which are more rugged. They're all meant for ocean travel. That's going to allow them to go ahead and move from place to place. By the way, most of this technology originated where? Sort of what's like the test case for a lot of this technology? Some from China, that would be one. China in particular, or I would say which trade route are we looking at that best demonstrates this? Yes, absolutely, right? So the Indian Ocean trade route, so whether it's the Arabian Dhow, so a lot of technologies brought in from Indian Ocean trade, gets transmitted west, they figure all this out, all of a sudden Portugal's going around Africa, and we have colonization this way here. Okay, fantastic. Let's go to part of the Columbian Exchange, course Africans brought, very few of you guys got this. Oh, by the way, European exploration, land claims, and so forth. All right, we can move past this real quick. That was the map I was getting at. All right, a few of you guys got this. It's rice and okra. Again, something you would find in this particular reading. But the part that I really want to clarify, and I've been trying to do this in class quite a bit, is what is the Columbian Exchange? Okay, what is the Columbian Exchange? Someone explain to me what the Columbian or no, let me. I'm going to do the other way. Tell me what the Columbian Exchange is not. Tell me what the Columbian Exchange is not. That everyone gets incorrect.
It's not really economic. Like, it is kind of economic, but it's not like a trade route or a specific like economic faction, I guess.
We talk about preset categories, right? Remember preset?
Oh, it's also not political.
It's not political. It's not economic. Hey, what category? If we were to categorize Columbian Exchange, which category would it be?
Social.
Social.
Not social.
Technology.
I mean, social is close, but
Technological or something.
technology is okay. And think about this.
Food.
Food. They are food. Yes, you're right. It's environmental. Thanks, hon. Right. So in a lot of ways, this is environmental. Right. The Columbian Exchange is an environmental phenomena, right? Whereby you have now one continent and another continent that are closed systems. Those of you guys who are scientists, right? You guys are science people. They're closed systems. All of a sudden now, this closed system invades this one. This closed system invades another, right? And now we get all sorts of consequences to come out of this here. So the Columbian Exchange is an environmental phenomena, right? And so what's probably the biggest, the most impactful phenomena coming out of the Columbian Exchange from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas? What's the biggest one?
The creation of new slaves.
Yeah, in regards to Columbian Exchange. The spread of crops, sure. Disease, which one, by the way? Disease is probably the one. right? It's so particularly smallpox, right? Think about what smallpox does to the population of the Americas. Okay, and that itself, when we talk about Columbian exchange, again, it's not trade. It's not we just bring stuff over. That could be, but really the key element we're looking at with the Columbian exchange is an environmental effect, right? This is human environmental interaction gone crazy of sorts. So that's the biggest one in regards to Americas to Afro-Eurasia. That's the one to note here. Now, if you could come up with some of the crops and some of the products and so forth, sure, you can definitely do this. But again, this is about things like disease. It's about livestock, crops, and so forth. That gets moved from one closed system to the other. And all of a sudden, there's a huge dramatic effect. Let's actually even look at the crops going back to Europe. What's probably the most impactful out of this group right here? Historically, the most impactful. Yeah. Celine says potatoes. I would take that. Potatoes and corn, probably. Right. So again, this is an environmental effect on the rest, on in terms of political growth. All that is based upon this environmental change, leading to economic change and so forth. But again, the Columbian exchange as an environmental effect. Those guys who were in my class, we did an entire activity on this. Right. You had some primary source readings, and you're supposed to sort out the effect of those things like diseases like malaria and so forth. That's coming from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas and vice versa. Okay. All right. So let's go to 3. Which of the following states were most powerful, actually increased in power from 1750 to, by the way, one more thing in terms of Columbian exchange. What's probably the key cash crop that goes from the Afro-Eurasia to the Americas?
Tobacco or sugarcane?
Tobacco and sugar, right? The particularly sugar, right? That one's going to change. That is probably the preeminent cause of the African slave trade is sugar. Okay, fantastic. All right, let's go to 3. Which states were more powerful in 1750 to 1450? Hey, nicely done. Britain as a key maritime power. Russia. Okay. Oh, by the way, if we're to say, look, this is 2 of the 3 are imperial powers. In other words, they're setting up colonies. Elsewhere. What's the 2 of the 3 that are you could say imperial powers that are conquering natives in other lands? That would be particularly Britain is one. That's pretty clear cut. Okay, but we probably don't talk about Russia and which direction is Russia going. If we were to say Moscow, if Moscow is right here, actually Moscow and St. Petersburg are right here. Which direction is Russia moving? Where is their conquest?
Northeast.
Yeah, east, right? For us in the United States, it's the Wild West. For them, it's the Wild East. And they're going after what particular product? What export product are they going after? Is Russia going after?
Irons and mountains.
Not necessarily iron. So they're going out to Siberia, right? The coal to Siberia. What are they finding in Siberia? What's the export impetus for going to this godforsaken land of freezing cold? Oil. That's late. That's now. So Lex, thanks. That's 21st century. That's what they're doing right now. It would be fur. Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. Okay. So fur is it. Okay. Beaver, fur, and so forth. So all right. Fantastic. Let's go to 4. Which important events affected the development of Christianity between 1450 and 1750? You guys did a pretty good job with that. This is one of those questions where you can talk about change over time events in Christianity and religion, right? Ranging from the Protestant Reformation, that's one of the big ones, but then also as well, the creation of new religious societies in the Catholic Church, like the Jesuits, who are going to be out there in the forefront of not just missionary work, but also of exploration. Okay, and the growth of Eastern Orthodoxy in Russia. So all of those are dramatic changes in Christianity. The Protestant Reformation plus the Catholic Reformation or the Counter-Reformation that's meant to reform the Catholic Church with the growth of the Protestant Church. Okay, any questions on this? I know we didn't spend too much class time on this. by any means. Any questions on the changes in Christianity in this period?
So, how did Eastern Orthodoxy, because I picked Eastern Orthodoxy spread in Russia, but like, how did that affect Christianity as a whole if Eastern Orthodoxy was primarily in Russia?
So that becomes the linking point. And that's the primary. So here's Russia's going to develop, but Russia's going to develop in a way where it's going to have its own ideas, its own monarchy. But this, in a lot of ways, it is connecting point to the West, to the rest of the West, in particular the Eastern Orthodox Church in the Baltic, or in the Balkans, excuse me. So Russia's going to be in an interesting case where they're going to develop their own culture, their own society. Serfdom is going to continue in Russia, but its key connecting points are going to be the Eastern Orthodox Church, and then plus also anytime they desired Westernization, Western technologies, and so forth. But that's the key effect. It will become, after the fall of the what's that other empire? The Byzantine Empire. The Russian Empire sort of takes up the mantle of the state that supports Eastern Orthodoxy. So, all right, fantastic. Anything else on this, on 4? All right, let's go to 5. Which of the following is true about both Spain and France in the period of 1450 to 1750? The type of governance, most of you guys got this, type of governance that developed in Europe. Okay? And this itself, if we were going to talk about absolutism as a change in Europe at this time here. I can't write. A change in Europe. What would be the initial condition? What would be the initial condition? So if this is by 1750, this is the predominant government at this point, what would be the initial condition around 1500? Just as a CCOT exercise here. What would define the politics of most of Europe? It would be, thank you guys, feudalism. Okay, so again, keep this in mind here. So we move in Europe from feudalism to absolutism, and sort of what, if we go to our next unit here, what challenges absolutism? What's the further change here? If we're going to go 1750 and beyond, parliamentary monarchy, so some sort of constitutional monarchy. Enlightenment, we call constitutional monarchy, what's democracy, fantastic, right? So democracy. Question came up, what's absolutism? One king thinks he's completely as justified. Oh, by the way, what's the justification for absolutism, by the way? One king believing that he is all powerful.
The divine right, in
Yeah.
which the belief that he is chosen by God and questioning him is questioning God.
Right, and so this becomes again, it's a common thread in world history, right? But you find religious justification for your rule and the belief that these people are the be-all, end-all, the representative of God. And this makes them really powerful, right? Probably more powerful than any Islamic sultan on the basis that there's not as much religious challenge, especially at the local level. Okay. Fantastic. Let's go to 6. Which of the following did not live during the during this particular time period? Not a great question, but again, this is more so just to bring up a few people and their particular importance here. So let's go through each one. Shi Hongdi is the correct answer. Let's go through each one here, though. Michelangelo. Michelangelo is known for what?
The Sistine
good art.
Chapel.
And
Yeah,
stuff.
Sistine Chapel, amongst many other things here. Martin Luther.
The creation of Protestantism.
The Protestant Reformation. Probably the, let's go to Akbar. Akbar, first of all, which empire?
Mughal Empire.
So the Mughals in India. And what's he known for, by the way?
Being the Mughals' most greatest leader and introducing trade routes to the country and helping it build foreign relations.
What in terms of foreign relations and governance, what was unique about Akbar's form of governance? In this case, it's, Akita's got it here. This is a religious tolerance. Religious tolerance, religious tolerance, fantastic. And let's go to, we've got Suleiman. What's Suleiman known for? First of all, which empire?
The Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, the Ottoman. What's he known for, by the way?
Oh, beautifying Istanbul.
So that's
And
part of it, yeah. Beautification of Istanbul. Many, oftentimes, the golden age of the Ottoman Empire. He's also known as the lawgiver as well. The implementation of Sharia law into the Ottoman society. That'll be part of it as well. Okay, fantastic. Let's go to 7. Which of the following most negatively affected the infusion of New World silver into the global economy? Most of you guys said China, but the Ottoman Empire is probably a better response here. But part of this is, again, that that particular answer isn't as important as some of the big picture concepts here. Okay, how does silver make a society poor?
It can cause like runaway of inflation that like basically kills certain economies when the influx of silver makes the current currency basically like worthless.
Yeah. And it's not like it's something they have control over. They probably could have, but again, it becomes sort of a habit of you keep digging up and finding more and more and more. And the part of the problem is that, at least for Spain, what are they have all of this to spend. What are they spending on, by the way? What's Spain spending on that in the end isn't going to be beneficial to them?
personal extravagance.
So monarchies and their personal extravagance. Okay, what else are they spending on? The Spanish Inquisition. Yeah, that's part of it. Though you could make an argument the Spanish Inquisition worked out for them in trying to create sort of a state religion, right? So that could be an issue here. Hey, any others? What else are they spending on? Just put a big picture
Naval
here.
exploration.
Say that one more time.
Naval exploration.
Exploration, that's part of it. Hey, but what's probably even more costly than exploration?
Trying to build like a colonizing empire.
Yeah, they paid a lot in order to maintain this entire society. So this is very direct central control. Okay? And what they were not spending on was industry. Okay? Spain itself remains a relatively poor agrarian society. They're not making investments in any form of manufacturing or so forth here. So that becomes an issue. And also think about it in this case here. If they are truly they're going to see themselves as the defenders of Catholicism, okay, who are they going to fight against?
Muslims.
Muslims, yes. So in this case, Muslims, but most of the Muslims at least in Europe, are going to be evicted from their traditional homes at this point. Who are they fighting against? Protestants, yes. So again, all of the various religious wars of again, we're still at that point where feudalism still plays a role in most European societies, and so the Spanish are spending this money on trying to get more European lands. They're intermarrying themselves with the Austrians, and then from there, they're fighting all sorts of wars of succession, wars of religion, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that's where all their money is going. Not great spending, and it's going to make sure by the 17th and 18th centuries, Spanish Empire is a shell of itself at this point. Okay, fantastic. Let's go to the next set is a set of stimulus-based multiple choice questions. Let me see. Why do I have this? Joint stock company, mercantilism. We'll come back to that. I think so. All right. Let me go ahead and. This is supposed to be the slide afterwards. Okay, so let's go ahead and you guys have this particular. You get a text like this. Okay, and the first thing that I ask with the stimulus-based multiple choice questions is, at its core, what do you know? So again, even just looking at all of a sudden, you look at this prompt and go like, I see Netherlands, I see right here, I see Netherlands. Okay. And then from there, I see Charter Dutch East India Company. When you see this in a stimulus-based multiple choice question, regardless of what is actually written here, you have to be able to set the context now. Okay. So what's the context here? Okay, what do we know? What should you know about, okay, the Dutch West India Company, okay, charters, and the Netherlands and so forth here? What should you know about this? What are some terms, some ideas you should figure out just from this?
Mercantilism.
Right, so you're gonna have to eventually get terms such as mercantilism. Okay, some of you guys brought up a monopoly. Okay. So if you know these, okay, and not only that, but you have a general idea of where the Dutch colonies were. Okay, you know it's in the Pacific. You know it's in parts of the West Indies, parts of Africa as well, and that should help you sort of figure it out. Okay? Figure out some of the responses and some of the answers here. So that's where these questions or this slide comes from. Just to give you an idea, here's the Dutch, both East India Company and West India Company. So if you actually look at the various, oh, by the way, there was a Dutch colony in what is known as the United States. Anyone know the original Dutch colony in the United States? In what will become the United States? And now pretty much one of the financial capitals of the world.
New York.
Yeah, New York, which was New Amsterdam, right? But they had colonies in New York, in South America, in South Africa, in India, and in Macau, which is right by Hong Kong, and also the Dutch colonies in Japan as well, or the Dutch outpost in Japan as well. So here's a fun picture of Macau, by the way. Like this, someone implementing an image onto each other. All right, so with that, hey, the questions are listed, and you already have access to a lot of the answers here. But again, with these stimulus-based questions, hey, be quick. Okay, make a decision, and a lot of this is oftentimes not necessarily based on the text itself. It's based on your understanding of Dutch East India Company, of mercantilism and how it works, and a monopoly and how it works here. So with that, I'm not necessarily going to go through the answers here. I'm more interested to see if you guys know, just based upon this here, because again, this was probably one of the answers here. Hey, what's mercantilism?
When the state gets involved with like the economy and basically the government starts like chartering like a general type company to help secure a monopoly. So they use their political leverage in terms of like getting colonies and stuff to advance their own country's economy by monopolizing the trade in the area they have control over.
Yes. So this is going to be one of those cases where the government itself isn't strong enough, or it doesn't have enough resources. Taxation is still a big issue. These states just don't gather enough revenue at this time. And so what they do is they charter out to private enterprise who says, hey, we're going to give you command and control over these places that you take over. We're going to give you representation for us. But these are by no means a individualized government action. In other words, they're relying on people and their desire for profit as a means to generate these particular empires. Okay, so that's mercantilism. So if you understand this, then it'll help you to make these particular responses as such. So competition for European states, which most of you guys got there. That's a hard question. You guys actually got that relatively well. Mercantilist policies, the emergence of new economic and political elites that come about from this, the new middle class, the European city dweller, and the gentry. This one was the most troublesome. It's funding for visual and performing arts, but again, this one's not a big deal. You guys, in terms of getting these answers correct, you guys actually did a pretty good job. So, all right, excellent work. Another one to note is the British East India Company, because in the end, they're going to take over most of modern day India and Pakistan. So this becomes another essential mercantile corporate entity. Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part here. So let's go to question 8 we brought up here, which is not an example of the new elite classes that is brought about. Okay, so there are elite classes from each of these particular time periods and each of the answers. The Manchus. What's the relationship of the Manchus in China by the time we get to the Qing dynasty, the last Chinese dynasty? This is around 1750-ish.
They were the conquering people who established the Qing dynasty.
Yes, absolutely. The Creoles in Spanish America. The Creoles were the group that was what? Who are the Creoles?
They were Europeans, but they were born in the Americas.
Yes, absolutely. Europeans born descended directly from the white Spanish population, particularly. So that's the Creoles. They become this new, again, middle class elite. Many of the bureaucrats, lower level bureaucrats that's running the state. Let's see what others. The urban entrepreneurs in the various entrepôts, okay, in cities like Calicut, and many of them, again, this isn't discussed that frequently for us, but a lot of the people that the Dutch particularly used in places like Java and others were actually women who became sort of the middle individuals between local producers and the Dutch merchants. And so they became part of this sort of middle class elite as well. And then finally, we have the European gentry as well. Fantastic. Let's go to 9, which is the least politically unified in the 16th century. And those would be the Italian city-states. Most of them are listed here. Let's see, most of them are listed. Let's see, many of them eventually will be conquered, but for now, again, Italian city-states will continue to be an influential force in the Mediterranean, but it's going to lose its key role later. All right, 10, using the map, which is most commonly carried. Again, we discussed this briefly. Let's see here. In the transport of slaves, the forced labor system that grows immensely during this time here. Okay, 11, which of the following profited the most from the Atlantic Circuit? Atlantic Circuit. So first of all, what is the, let's see, from the Atlantic Circuit in the 16th century here? Let's see, I have Spanish. Why would I have Spanish dominance of the Americas? Well, that works. C or D, either one works here. But first of all, what's the Atlantic Circuit, by the way? What's the Atlantic Circuit? I'll mark this as C and D. How about that?
The Atlantic Circuit is like a building up of colonies through trade.
Partially, and that trade, particularly. What are some of the key items in this trade route, by the way?
Weapons?
Say that one more time.
Was it weapons?
Weapons, yeah, weapons to Africa, right? So now we get this triangular trade system, right? Weapons to Africa. What else is there?
Slaves.
So slaves from Africa to the Americas, and then give me a good. So we got Alexis providing sugar from the Americas to Afro-Eurasia. Okay, 12, in Russia, the position most closely matched with the position of daimyo in Japan is what we call a boyar, okay? But do note the term aristocracy and the continuation. You can make an argument like this time period is the height of aristocracy around the world. Okay, so we've gone through this quite frequently. I think you guys are in pretty good shape with that here. Okay, let's go to question, comment.
Where is aristocracy again? What is it?
So, all right, someone explain to me. Aristocracy is
rich people who have birthrights and they have a bunch of land.
all right, so it is particularly birthright. And one thing I'm going to have to note, okay, it gives you. So aristocracy gives you particular advantages to be wealthy, okay? But this is by no means a guarantee, okay? Wealth is not necessarily a descriptor of aristocracy. Aristocracy is solely about birthright, and oftentimes this birthright that's connected with what? It's not connected with money is connected with what?
Your lineage and connection to the royal family. Oh.
Land, right? Royal family and all that stuff, that's still more birthright. That's still more birthright or feudal contract, right? That's one. But this is usually, there's the connection between land ownership and aristocracy, right? This is the traditional feudal order, right? Because the traditional way to generate wealth is land ownership. And what we start to get with maritime revolution is that this is not going to be this, the ability of this in order to generate wealth, it's going to decrease. Instead, it's going to be about trade and exchange. Okay? You can see that distinctive difference in this time period compared to the subsequent ones, right? Because in the end, it's going to be the Industrial Revolution, that ability to produce profit, right? As opposed to just simply owning land and then extracting it from these poor peasants of sorts. So again, separate the notion of wealth and aristocracy, but instead connect land and land ownership and the passage of land and property, okay, by birthright. That's aristocracy. Good question.
Would the caste system be an example of aristocracy in Mughal India?
Yes, absolutely. So aristocracy is just that passage of, but oftentimes it's usually associated with ruling members, with ruling classes. All right, fantastic. Excellent question. So let's go to 13. Which of the following best describes Britain in the early 18th century? That's the creation of this new challenge of government in what is known as the constitutional monarchy in Great Britain, where there is the sharing of power between which two institutions? One is already listed. So one is Parliament, which you, so Lex has it here. So Parliament would be one institution, and by no means is this Parliament democratically elected at this point. Okay, they're still made up of mostly aristocrats, okay? Nobles, the clergy, and then some in the cities. So some urban gentry that gets representation in what becomes known as the House of Commons. But okay, this is not democratic just yet. But there's the sharing of power between Parliament and the monarchy. But most powerfully full of all, it's the law. Okay, that is that in the end will circumvent both of these institutions. Okay, fantastic. Questions, comments on that? All right, 14. Most sugar plantations in the New World were located, most of you guys got this, in the Caribbean and also add in Brazil as well. Right? Who's the owner of Brazil in this period?
Portugal.
Portugal, right? So Portugal owns most of Brazil. We have in the Caribbean, we've got the Spanish, we've got the French, we've got the English, we've got the Dutch, but European states, okay, that are all in the Caribbean sugar business, and therefore they're all in the slave business as well. So all of them are involved in that process. Okay, 15. Which one was the least powerful entity in this particular period? And that would be the Japanese emperor. Okay, who unified Japan, or which position unified Japan?
The shogun.
The shogun, right? The Tokugawa, okay, shogunate. Okay, so which is by the way, a military aristocracy. Okay, if you wanted to be able to categorize it with some terms here. So again, Tokugawa shogunate unifies Japan. So feudalism in Japan more or less ends during this period here. All right, 16. The Safavid Shahs utilized what in order to rule over Persia, and that would be the Shiite empire. So Shiism. Where else do we get religious justification of imperial rule? And we've sort of gone through this a little bit. Where else do we get religious, not necessarily Shiism, but other places where in this time period where religion is utilized to guarantee the rights of kings?
The French and the divine right.
So the French, so European countries, and the divine right, fantastic. We've got the China, the mandate of heaven, and which again, all are very similar here as well. You can make an argument in regards to the Russian czars. Okay, same thing using Eastern Orthodoxy. Okay, you could probably also add in the Aztec as well, and the usage of religious priests. All right, fantastic. 17, the architecture depicted in the photo best describes, you guys got one or the other. As long as nobody guessed medieval Gothic or Renaissance in that picture there. Okay? But a College Board favorite is the, tell me where this stuff is coming from, or at least be able to take your best possible guess here. But either way, all these are examples of the synthesis of cultures, okay? And particularly in regards to India. Okay? The Mughal Empire, for instance, is an example. The Mughal Empire, the Delhi Sultanate, both of which are instances of what theme outside of architecture here, of what theme in South Asia. Who are the rulers?
The rulers are known as Shahs, and they're the Islamic rulers,
Right.
but
So
they
it is-
ruled diverse subjects of like Hindus and like multiple religions.
Yes,
Well-
particularly. So the key theme we're looking at is, look, who's going to govern India, okay, of sorts, when you have two contending religious forces, okay, where in this case here at this era, you've got a Persian Muslim minority that is ruling a Hindu majority, and the creation of buildings like Taj Mahal, which is of Persian Islamic influence. Okay, but again, this is a constant theme in India. Who's going to rule despite this religious diversity? Okay, and it's still going on today. Okay, especially with the rise of Hindu nationalists in India. All right, fantastic. Let's go to 18. 18, which of the following best describes African slave trade in this particular period? Particularly, again, the slave trade is going to continue not just west, but it is also going east as well. And particularly, there's larger number of women were sent to the east as part of the slave trade into the Middle East. And so that's another thing that we haven't gone through as frequently, but it's there as well. Okay, let's talk about, now that we've discussed the slave trade and so forth here, okay, what are some of the labor systems that develop in this time period here? What are some of the labor systems? So in this case here, I'm going to divide them up into coerced and free labor systems. So one, we've got chattel slavery. Okay, you've got the mita system, the Spanish version of the mita system, okay, which is really just a forced labor tax. Okay. A tribute itself, the tribute system would be, that would be a previous, so tribute would be more of a taxation that's used in the Inca and the Aztec Empire. So that would be, if you're gonna say a change, this is what the change to would be, okay? Let's see, there's still conscription during this time. Yeah, you can make an argument, but conscription isn't necessarily a labor system. This is more of a, that's a military strategy of sorts. So serfdom, it would be still a coerced system. And the style of serfdom in the Spanish colonies would be the encomienda. Right? The encomienda would be it here. One other semi-free coerced system that grew up, that came out at this time here. Anyone of the semi-free labor system? Oh, Lex had it, that's right, I see it there. Okay, indentured servitude, right? You purchase passage by your labor, someone owns you for about 5 or 6 years, and supposedly you get money and land and so forth at the end of your system here. There are also free labor, not necessarily labor systems, but particularly in the Americas, in the North American colonies, you have the birth of sort of yeoman, small landed farmers. Okay. That exists here. Wage workers is going to be sort of that next stage here. So again, if we're doing some CCLT work, okay, it's going to be a feudal systems. Feudalism is going to move into these particular forms of both free and coerced labor systems. And then eventually in the next unit, we're going to get to wages, the wage system in the next unit. Okay, but for now, in this particular unit, we've got this here. migrant farmers and others where there are wages that they are earning from their work here. So wage worker labor system would be the next one. Fantastic, excellent. So there's my yeoman farmer right there. Okay, laboring in, what are all these?
Windmills.
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, windmills would be nice because we talk about a large investments, right, that are necessary. So you can't just simply decide to start a small farm and expect to have a mill that will thresh and pound and process the plants that you are growing here. So these are large plantations. Okay. By the way, let's just do some general work here. Who are the owner of plantations, by the way? Where do these plantations come from?
European settlers?
Not the settlers themselves here. There's very few of them. Some of them will, okay, but a lot of these, and sometimes you get wealthy aristocrats that will make these particular investments.
The companies, like charter companies.
Yeah, so we got these joint stock companies, okay, that will start some of these plantations. So a lot of these are are owned by joint stock companies. You guys mentioned aristocrats. Okay, aristocrats and nobles, which are going to have some ownership of this. But again, it's a combination thereof. Okay, it's not going to be, if you want to contrast this, it's not going to be the state that owns this. Okay?
Wait, Mr. Tom?
Yeah.
Why would a government need to rely on its companies? How would the company, like the Dutch East India Company, how would that company have more resources than the actual country?
We're still at the point where if we go in political science, this is what we call a weak state or a weak capacity state. Okay, so the countries at this point, they are unified, but their ability to be able to do things, it's really, really limited because they can't. There's still too much competition. That's one. The nobles are still really powerful, right? And the nobles are extracting from their peasants. Right? What the kings often get, they don't get this type of revenue. They might get it, but in order to generate that revenue, they're going to need bureaucrats, tax collectors, right? And none of that permission from their lords and nobles to collect these particular taxes. So the states aren't strong enough just yet. Okay? And so instead, because they don't have the resources to do so, they need to rely on more independent groups. Okay, the resources that are coming out from the new middle class in the cities, so the wealthy individuals from the cities, or really aspiring nobles to that extent. So in other words, it's all coming out of a weaker states, right? Let's make a contrast to this. Okay, a large, powerful state like China might be able to generate the resources to do these things if they choose to do it. They just don't choose to, right? This is not something they need or feel like they want at this point, right? Because they're far away. Okay? So right now the states are still too weak, and it's hard to imagine. This is now we're moving to some really, really intangible stuff for a lot of you guys at this point. But note that like they aren't strong enough. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Okay? They're still relatively small.
So
Right.
do these companies come from like aristocrats? Like, are there the owners like aristocrats and noble landowners and such own these companies?
Sometimes, yes. Okay, sometimes it is. Again, it's a combination thereof. So some nobility, some wealthy investors in the cities using joint stock companies. Eventually, you're going to get people like, especially in what becomes known as the United States, you're going to get people who take advantage of the situation and they become land speculators. Okay, and that's how they generate their wealth. So in other words, they purchase land and they resell it at a higher value because land was plentiful at that point. So there's a lot of different ways to generate wealth. It's just that it's not the state that is doing it, right? And if we're going to make the contrast, hey, if we get to this, so a lot of these groups are going to be really independent, especially in what becomes known as the United States. And the moment the British government decides like, gee, these colonies are going to cost a lot of resources. And not only that, but we have not extracted what we want from these colonies just yet. So let's go ahead and issue out some taxes for once. Okay, what's the response from the British colonists in the Americas?
They don't like the excessive colonists and declare revolution and begin
No
America.
taxation without representation. Boo-hoo. We rarely ever get taxed, but now we are, right? And so this is what happens. So in other words, when Britain's capacity to be able to govern increases, they get slapped by their colonists and say like, don't touch this. This is ours. So again, that's, I know, boo-hoo, America, right? So we started off our country as, trying, don't tax us, right? Yay, America, right? Don't tread on me. All right, so with that, excellent question, by the way. That's the type of question I hope this review session actually kind of brings here. So let's go ahead and there is I believe, a second set, a set of stimulus-based multiple choice questions here, which again, most of you guys actually are getting pretty well here, except for the last one. Which is hard. If that's like a 50-50, that's fine with you. But looks like from the results I'm getting, if you look at this image and think, what should you think automatically? What trade pattern is this? It's a shape, y'all, right? Triangular trade, that thing you learned in 8th grade. Right, that we didn't spend too much time on. We're hoping that your 8th grade teacher did a good work on that. Okay. But again, triangular trade. If you figured out, all right, there is now a system of trade whereby there is specialized export goods. Okay. Specialized export goods, again, the same concepts before: mercantilism, the slave trade, the Columbian Exchange, and smallpox creating this need for labor. All of a sudden you have the skyrocketing of African slave trade and all this coming to be. That's what this map technically is. And you guys were able to figure out that, look, this is all about cash crops. Okay. This is also, in this case, mercantilist economic policies. Again, these terms just pop up. Like once you understand what the stimulus is about, you don't have to spend that much time on it. Just like, okay, I know the topic. I'm just going to move on to this here. The last question, which of the following most contribute to the disruption of this trade system? This was hard. This would be, in this case, Enlightenment ideals saying slavery is wrong, therefore end of the slave trade, therefore this ends. So this, anyways. All right, so let's go ahead and move on with the time that we have left here. 19, which empire, this is about, in this case here, Russian expansion, applying sea-based technology to land-based empire. You can make a case for Suleiman the Magnificent. That may be the only one. But either or, if that's the case, you get a 50-50. We kind of move on here. Number 20, which belief comes out of that particular quote? Again, humanism would be it. And eventually, again, humanism is going to lead to what big European movement that's going to shape and alter the world? Enlightenment, right? Fantastic. Right, the Enlightenment. All right, 21, which are the highest social status in the Latin American colonies? Most of you guys got that. That would be peninsulares. But note one of the first, a lot of these racialized societies in the world. 22 most accurately describes the relationship between the English and their treatment of Native Americans. In this case here, again, the English pushed out Native Americans. The Spanish ends up intermarrying and integrating the society with. 23, most of you guys got Brazil, which is perfectly fine there, but all the answers were pretty tough here. But again, note that Brazil is the sugar colonies here in Brazil, and particularly the intermixing of population that would occur here is pretty dramatic. Okay, fantastic. 24, which of the following religious movements originated in this time period? Originated in the time period, you have the birth of two different faiths, Sikhism and Akbar's divine faith. Okay, so new religions that are created. 25, the Dev Sharme system and the examination system created in both cases, loyal professional bureaucrats. Oh, by the way, how did the Ottoman Dev Sharme system work?
It would steal children or forcefully take away children, specifically Christian children, ages 8 to 20 from their families to be trained into either becoming bureaucrats, warriors, or tax collectors, or any other job that would benefit the empire. And they were taught to respect the Sultan.
Yes, and particularly the primary issue in Muslim kingdoms, particularly, is who is going to be loyal to the Sultan, okay? Who's going to be loyal to the Caliph, and so you're going to find people, especially if you hire slaves, okay, they have no other loyalty than to you. Okay, all right. Fantastic. Let's go to 26. Matteo Ricci in that passage there is describing China, one of the key Jesuit map makers of the Ming and then later on the Qing as well. Number 27, we don't discuss the American praying towns, and so that might be an issue in terms of that question there. Even if we look at the other two samples here. And there's the praying towns right there, the Jisya and the Qing Q. All of these are examples of differential treatment. So in other words, this is you've got a minority or you've got a particular unique group that is different than the ruling class. And so now you populate Native Americans in American colonies into these separate praying towns. You have a special tax for non-Muslims, and you have a unique hairstyle that demonstrates subservience to the Qing dynasty in China. Okay, fantastic. Let's and then finally 28. This is not one that shows up in your book. This is what is known as the Treaty of Tordesillas. Right? And what the Treaty of Tordesillas did was it basically is an agreement between the Spanish and the Portuguese, basically saying, all right, let's this particular a longitude line right here, we're going to divide it up where everything east of this is Portugal, or most things east of this was Portugal, and most things to the west would be Spanish. But again, it's ethnocentric in the way that none of the other European nations are involved, and none of the Native Americans or Africans or Asians that are involved in this process was part of this discussion. But again, not necessarily required for you to note here. And then lastly, which statement best describes treatment of Christian missionaries by both China and Japan? Both were initially welcomed, but later on, access was closed. Access was closed, particularly with the persecution of Catholics in Japan as well. Okay, so with that, hey, we are right up at that 4:30 mark here. Any questions? Any questions remaining? I'm actually going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point. Okay. But in this case, with you guys are recording, thank you guys for listening, and we'll do this again next time.